What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to Celio's Network. This is just going to be a short update video on my thoughts on the standard format meta going into this weekend, which is going to include Atlantic City Regionals, Cologne Regionals, and the Sao Paulo special event. On my left, on your right on the screen, you'll see the top decks list. This is just like the upper echelon of decks. These are the decks I consider to be pretty viable to make it into day two. Obviously, all of these aren't in competition for the best deck in format, but I do think you'll see almost all of these have some sort of population in day two. So going from the top of that list I have here, Ability Zard is just pretty insane. I think most of the competitive community can agree that Ability Zard is going to have a really large showing. I'm expecting it to be at least 20% of the meta day one. I understand that's 1 in every 5 players, and I do think it can reach that popularity, especially with all of the different ways to build it and play it. So yeah, I think Ability Zard is one of the best plays for the event. I definitely think it's going to have a large showing in day 1 and day 2, and I highly expect it to be in the top 8. Mewtwo box, I actually think is a really bad play for the event at the moment. It was one of my top considerations up until probably yesterday when I started realizing that with all the one prizers and Ability Zard, it's just not looking too great right now. If Ability Zard was still built like it was for Worlds, and your opponent was planning to use Reshizard every single game, then Mewtwo seems kind of okay. But now players are wisely switching up to more single prize based variants of the ability fire deck, and Mewtwo doesn't bode really well versus a lot of one prizers that can potentially one shot it. I still think Mewtwo is a strong deck. We'll see play and we'll see success. I just don't think it is one of the best picks for the tournament because of the Ability Zard matchup when Ability Zard has a lot of one prizers in it. Green Zard, I think, can do really well if it's piloted by good players. It's kind of risky to play because you have to do the stamp and plant combo to try to get Ability Zard kind of stuck after they take their first big knockout. And especially when they have single prizers and you're not always going to be returning a knockout on a Reshi. Sometimes you'll just be knocking out a Baby Blown or a Turk. And it's not as impactful as, say, again, the Worlds format, where even if they took an early knockout and then you responded on that Reshizard, you also went down the 3 prizes and you hit them with the stamp plant. It's not the same right now. Even if you're knocking out a Heatran, that's still 1 less prize card, and then they can follow up with single prizers. So I do think Green Zard is still a very good deck, and it has good matchups elsewhere. But the Ability Zard matchup is still really shaky, in my opinion. PikaRom, I really don't. I don't like playing this deck at all. I don't think it's very good because of how speedy Ability Zard and other Welder decks are. Like Ability Zard, Mewtwo, and Blacephalon the Ganondorf are all really fast because of Welder, or at least have the potential to be fast. Then Ability Zard is trading with single prizers when able. And then even Green Zard plays Welder and can be kind of oppressive versus PikaRom. Now, of course, PikaRom can get the turn 1 full blitz and then the turn 2 tag bolt, which is really good. But you also have to hope that your opponent isn't prepared for that with like a Mew or even something that can one-shot the PikaRom and you don't even get to the turn 2 tag bolt. Like turn 2 tag bolt just doesn't seem very likely in this format because like Ability Zard can have like an empty board with nothing really threatening for the turn 2 tag bolt to go like knockout active, knockout the Dene, and then out of nowhere they go like Baby Blown, Welder attach, double fire crystal, and you're knocked out and there go all of your energy, which is something that I've been seeing happening in testing. So I don't think PikaRom is very good. I've heard a lot of players say that it doesn't really have good matchups to show for itself, and I tend to agree with that. It doesn't really have good matchups, which in the past hasn't counted decks out, like Girampagarb in Standard 2 seasons ago. It really just had 50-50s, but it was still a really good deck. Whereas PikaRom, its 50/50s are kind of shaky because you have to hope your opponent doesn't get their ideal setup while you do get your ideal setup, and then you need either a judge or a stamp or a plant or some kind of combination of those to stick. So I just really don't have high hopes for PikaRom, but like I said, I do expect all of these decks to have showings and for most of them to make it into day 2 at some type of capacity. Next is Tag Malamar, and I like Malamar a lot more than I did a couple or a few weeks ago, and I think that can be said for a lot of players right now. It's been doing well at Cups, but I don't hold that very high because Cups are best of 1 and you're playing against a smaller population, possibly a less skillful population depending on your area. So I don't think you should take those results too highly, but the deck does have insane matchups across the board on paper for single games. But then when you put matchup percentages into a best 2 out of 3 with 50 minutes, things change because ties are a part of that now. I do think Tag Malamar looks really great on paper, and it is one of my backup choices, since I think you can play. You don't really need to build your deck differently, but you can play your deck differently to beat Ability Zard or at least go 50/50 with it. And then none of your matchups are really too scary aside from Green Zard and Guardian, but Guardian needs to be played really, really well and built correctly. Green Zard, I think people are more familiar with the deck, so that matchup is very scary, but Guardian, I think you can take some wins against players who are a little less experienced and a little less prepared with their deck. So I do think Malamar is going to be really, really popular. I think it'll be number 2 behind Ability Zard based decks or Ability Fire decks, since some of them are cutting the Zard. I think that'll be number 2, probably between 10 and 15% of the day 1 population. Next, Blacephalon the Ganadel. I think Blounds is strong for a regional because it just blows things up, like regardless of what you're playing against on the other side of the board, unless it has a Fairy Charm Ultra Beast attached to it, or it's a Keldeo GX, you're probably blowing it up. So I think Blounds is good just for that. It's just super solid. It's not like spectacular in any way, in my opinion, but it has Welder and B-String, which the other decks don't have. And I talked about that in my article that went up yesterday, I believe, on Flipside Gaming. So if you want more of my thoughts on Blounds and Welder decks in general, go check that out. The article's free. Then next is Guardian. I've played Guardian a bit. I've actually become more akin to it than I was prior to the past few weeks. I think the deck is good when it is not respected, but I think enough people respect it now with labs and counter Pokemon that can swing into it in designated matchups that I don't think it's that great of a play anymore. It does have a pretty good Malamar matchup. Depending on the build, it's harder to play. In the build with scoop ups and a lot of healing, then it's pretty easy to beat Malamar. But in the build with like 3 to 4 switches and then Xerneas GX and much less healing, it's harder to beat Malamar, but definitely very possible. I think it's actually favored, but when I say it's harder to beat it, you have to play much more close to perfect than you do with the other build. And then if PikaRom's playing like the plant version without labs, that's like an auto win. That's really easy. Mewtwo is kind of close. I think it might be slightly favored for Guardy because of the stamp plant potential. Abilities are really, really rough, but you can play Wait and See Hammer, potentially Lugia GX, potentially Giant Bomb, I think it's called. So there are ways to better your Zard matchups, but I think it's just such a hard grind over 9 games with Guardian where you have to draw into supporters for the first turn, ideally greens, and hit greens at some point to get the cards out of your deck that you need. And then B, you have to hit the text that you need versus the Zard matchups and have it worked out ideally, or you just take losses to all the Zards you see, and then you have to play perfectly and also draw well versus your favorable matchups so that they stay favorable. I just think it's really grindy, and it's not the kind of deck I want to go into AC with, but like I said, I do think all of these decks will make it into day 2. Next, Pidgeotto and Shedinja. I don't want to play either of these decks because they're really fragile. And in testing, there are some games where it's like, okay, my opponent scoops, so we just go to the next game in our testing. And then there's other games where it's like I'm getting run over because I'm trying to establish a board and I just cannot do it in enough time. And that kind of scares me. I want to be able to take prizes at this tournament because of how aggressive the decks are, how many tag teams and GXs there are around, and we know a lot of the expected meta. So I think it's something you can prepare for with your attackers, which is why I'm leaning towards something more like Ability Zard, because you can plan out what you're going to play against in a sort of way, like Hoopa or Flareon GX and EVGX for the Malamars, and then Baby Blounds. I really like Baby Blound and the Abilities Art. But I'm getting off topic. I think Pidgeotto and Shedinja can just get overrun very easily while trying to set up. I do think they're strong, and I do think they will make day 2. But I do not expect it to be played in numbers in day 1. I don't expect it to have a great success rate into day 2. But I don't know. I could see a Pidgeotto making it in the top 8 for sure. The last deck I have here is Naganadel Quagsire. I'm very inexperienced with this deck in the current meta, so I don't have too much to say on it. But I don't think a lot of people respect the Keldeo, and they don't want to put Keldeo counters into their decks, so I think Naganadel Quagsire can definitely take some cheeky wins that way. And then the last deck I'm going to mention real quick that is not on the list is Poipole Stall or Poipole Control, which there's a deck profile on this channel about that. I was really on Poipole, and actually in my matchup notes that I was talking about with friends, September 4th, I looked in my notes. Something I said about the Malamar matchup was that it was free as long as people didn't add something like Jinx or like a second Mew or extra damage counter placements. And we've actually seen Jinx and second Mew being played a bit, and that kind of scared me off of it. Also, Vulpix's first attack is flip a coin if heads. Defending Pokemon can't attack next turn. So you would have to set up double Poipole for those situations, and you really can't because you're already setting up Lunatone and Solrock versus that deck if you even have both of them in your deck. And Ability Zard is something I'm taking into consideration a lot. It's pretty much the only deck that would scare me off of another deck. But yeah, Poipole, again, like Pidgeotto and Shedinja, it's fragile if you don't get set up in time, but then there's also the point where there's just things popping up in the meta that make it seem like not a great idea. So at the moment, my top 2 decks that I'm choosing between are Ability Zard, some sort of variant, and then a Malamar, Tag Malamar with Tina's. I think Blounds would probably be my third, but I really don't see myself choosing a deck that's not Malamar or Ability at the moment. And then the decks I've pretty much completely sworn off, like there's nothing getting me on these decks, are Mewtwo Box and PikaRom. I don't think I could get on either of those decks. I really enjoy playing Mewtwo, but the single prizers inability scare me off of it. And then I don't enjoy playing PikaRom at all. And I think so many of these top decks are so close in power level that you should play something that's fun and enjoyable for you within reason. And I really enjoy playing Ability at the moment, so that's looking like a strong choice for me. And that's pretty much all I wanted to say in this video, just a short little update on my thoughts on the meta to go along with the meta discussion from the other day. And tomorrow I'll have up my top decks in Standard for the week going into this weekend with some statistics taken from polls from players in the community. So thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time here on Celio's Network.